Welcome everyone to the final round of the European Club Cup 2025. On your screen is the world champion Domaraju Gukesh. He has had an excellent tournament until now. He scored 3.5 out of 4. Especially important was his win over Arjun Erigaisi, where he managed to take his team home towards a victory that helped them to be right now in the sole lead going into the last round of the tournament. His team Super Chess is now taking on Taxera Aqua Profit, and his opponent for the last round is Vladimir Fedoseev. An important clash. All that Super Chess has to do is make sure they don't lose here, and if they manage to win, that would be just a clean sweep with 7 victories in 7 rounds. Gukesh shakes hands with Vladimir Fedoseev. He has had quite an amazing year of 2025, and we could say that he is a dangerous opponent for Gukesh. It's interesting that even in the last round of the Olympiad 2024, where India won the gold medal, it was Gukesh versus Fedoseev in the last round. And Gukesh had the black pieces there. He had managed to score a win there. And let's see what happens here. Fedoseev taking his time for the first move and opens with pawn to d4. The same move that he had played that time as well. There, I believe he had gone for the London system. And will he continue with that? Not really. This time he goes for pawn to c4. And Gukesh plays e6. This has been Gukesh's go-to move. He hardly ever puts his pawn on g6 to go for King's Indian or Grunfeld setups. Knight to f3. And now pawn comes up to d5. The Queen's Gambit declined. Knight comes to c3. And Gukesh plays the Ragozin with bishop b4. This is like, I wouldn't call it a childhood love for Gukesh, because he started playing it, I believe, when he was around GM strength, and took him all the way to 2700. Pawn takes, pawn takes. White has many ways to play here, but essentially what black is saying is that I'm mixing up Nimzo Indian along with Queen's Gambit decline. Like both the moves, I have my pawn in the center, I have my bishop on b4. Knight c6 is important to defend the bishop on b4. And now bishop to g5 played. Let's see what Gukesh now plays here. He goes for the move h6. Now bishop h4 looks very natural, but isn't the best because of g5, bishop g3 and knight jumping into e4, which is why Fedoseev simply chops off the knight. Bishop takes f6, queen takes on f6. And this position has been reached several times. e3 played, and it's very solid for both sides. White can claim to be slightly better. Black castles. The main move now is bishop e2 and short castling. And Fedoseev, he plays the second most popular move here, rook to c1, also very logical, defending here. I think essentially what white is saying is that your knight on c6 is misplaced. But now Gukesh puts pressure on the g2 point, and Fedoseev plays h4. He is in his preparation. That's interesting. There have been 5 games with this move h4, and Gukesh, after 5 minutes of thought, plays his bishop to f5. A very strong move, just developing his pieces. And Fedoseev goes h5, kicking the queen away from g6. And where will the queen go? Well, it goes to d6 square. Queen to d6. And now let's see where the bishop moves. I think bishop e2 makes a lot of sense. Yes, he plays his bishop to e2. And now that the queen is defending the bishop, black can reroute the knight. Knight comes to e7. And yes, later on maybe you go pawn to c6 and continue that way. Maybe knight c8, knight b6 is one of the ideas here. And he plays pawn to a3, attacking the bishop and forcing it to decide where to go. And a5, very interesting move by Gukesh. I thought he would take here, but his point is if you take the rook attacks the queen and the pawn attacks the knight. So that's the reason why a3 is played, a5 is played, and now queen to b3, threatening to take the bishop. And you must take here on c3. So bishop takes c3 by Gukesh. And I believe rook takes c3, or maybe even queen takes c3 for that matter. He takes with rook, pressure here, and Gukesh now plays pawn to b6. One of the things that white has to think about is should he castle, because the h5 pawn could be slightly weakened. But Fedoseev has no such issues. He simply castles. If he manages to put rook c1 and put pressure on c7, he would have something to play for, which is why I believe Gukesh can go directly for c5 break here. Yes, he pushes his pawn to c5, and yeah, maybe c4, b5, b4. If black gets that, that would be huge. So pawn to c5, the game getting more and more exciting here. Also, the other games are pretty interesting on the adjoining boards. Pawn takes pawn taken. And now b takes c5. He plays his rook to c1, putting pressure on c5. Well, I'm not so sure if you want to play a move like c4, because queen d1 and d4 gets a bit weak. But a4 played here by Gukesh first. Now the queen comes back to d1. So c5 is weak, but also b2 is weak. So rook c8, and notice how this bishop cuts across the position. So rook c8 defending the c5 pawn. And Fedoseev now goes knight to d2. Interesting move. I wonder where the knight is heading. Maybe he wants to play b3 takes, knight b3, attack this pawn. Queen comes to b6, putting pressure on the b2 pawn. And pawn to b3. He pushes it ahead. And I think this is more like a sign here by Fedoseev saying that, okay, I'm happy with equality. Pawn takes pawn by Gukesh. And knight takes would be actually a blunder because of rook takes a3. So rook takes b3 is correct. And now queen a5 maybe. He goes queen f6. And Fedoseev goes rook to c3. Keeping some pressure on the c5 pawn. Gukesh could go back. I mean, there could be a repetition with queen b6, but he goes c4. And sometimes this works, like if you are able to slowly mount pressure here on a3 pawn, because everything else is well defended. However, white can instantly try to equalize with e4. Yes, he plays it, because now you take on e4 and the c4 pawn is weak. He takes on e4, and then here knight takes c4. Seems like a natural move. He takes with the bishop here. Have to be slightly careful about some pressure here. Although the rook is defended, he goes rook d8, pinning. And now queen to e2. Fedoseev keeping up the pressure on the e4 pawn. The knight jumps to d5, attacking the rook. Bishop takes on d5. Rook takes d5. And now knight takes e4. He takes the pawn in the center. Well, if you take bishop e4, queen e4, maybe white has an extra pawn to play with. But the most accurate move is queen e. Yes, moving the queen to the e file, pinning the knight there, and also attacking the pawn on a3. Rook comes to e3, defending the knight. And Gukesh now chops off the knight on e4. And I believe if rook e4, then queen takes a3. And this is how the game could end in a draw. Yes, they agree to a draw. Rook e8 takes, check, f5, and this could be a way to draw the game. Pat on the back on Gukesh by Ivan Sokolov in this tournament. He's done his job 4 out of 5. That's a gold medal winning performance, not just for the team but also for himself on board number 1. The match actually ended in the favor of Super Chess as Sarana and Diach both scored a win. Although Maksudlu lost, they won 2 games, and that's how Super Chess became the European Club Cup champions 2025. A big congratulations to the entire team of Super Chess and Gukesh, who played really well and is back in top 10 in the world, going to the champion showdown in St. Louis with a lot of confidence.